Hello. Ohio gozaimasu. And it's a lovely hot day today. So, of course, I am sitting inside, writing about and making videos about Japanese cinema, as I'm doing most days. This edition of You Should Be Watching features a brand new Blu-ray release, one just hot off the press by the BFI, the British Film Institute. It is Kitano Takeshi's first international film, Brother, a much derided film. I was delighted to be asked to contribute to this release. I have contributed an essay to the accompanying booklet. And what better time to say a few words about this film and why you should be watching it. So why should you be watching Kitano Takeshi's Brother? You may well be familiar with the name Kitano Takeshi or his on-screen alter ego, Beat Takeshi. You may have seen Takeshi's Castle when it was aired quite a while ago now on British TV. You might have seen some of his better known, more acclaimed and successful films like Hanabi or Zatoichi. Recently, Kitano has become less prolific as a filmmaker and far less successful and acclaimed. His recent work has struggled for international distribution and visibility. And in some ways, this is a shame. Even though his work has been more patchy, it's still largely worth watching. And I think the film in question today, Brother, whilst not his best, comes at an interesting time in his career and synthesizes quite a lot of the themes and the style that make his work, or at least made his work 10 or 15 years ago, very, very distinctive and very singular. And that led to him being canonized internationally as a key Japanese auteur. So, as I said, Brother was Kitano's first international co-production. It was made with several different producers and companies and filmed, for the most part, in Los Angeles. The story concerns a Japanese Yakuza, played by Kitano himself, or Beat Takeshi, his stage name, if you like, who falls foul of the strictures of his gang and is persuaded to move to Los Angeles to avoid recriminations and reprisals. And whilst there, he hooks up with a half-brother who is already there, and through insinuating himself into his brother's cohort of friends, forms something like a facsimile of a Yakuza gang with them, and begins to engage in turf warfare with other local gangs, notably Hispanics, and ultimately with the mafia themselves. Now, I said that Brother wasn't terribly well received when it was first released around the year 2000. I think a lot of the reaction against it came from a perception, quite a curious one, that the film was somehow taking its place in what was a then prominent sense of Far Eastern Asian action cinema. It was a time when the West was just about well acquainted with particularly Hong Kong action cinema, the heroic bloodshed of filmmakers like John Woo and Ringo Lam, who had already made films in Hollywood in the 1990s to largely successful ends, at least in popularizing the type of stylized action cinema that they were the key proponents of. And we'd also seen various Yakuza films being released by this time. Kitano's work has already, or had already, been noted for its violence. And here, the violence is just as sudden, abrupt, and graphic as was the case in earlier films like Hanabi, Sonatin and Violent Cop. But the perception that this was somehow capitalizing on, perhaps opportunistically inserting itself into this paradigm of stylized Asian action cinema or pan-Asian action cinema is quite erroneous. And the film was seen as, in some ways, more conventional than it actually is. The film is far more of a Kitano film than generally has been allowed. It's a film replete with his minimalistic style, the sense of slowing down or retarding the progress of the narrative in order to feature scenes where very little, certainly of any narrative import, and certainly from the point of view of action set pieces, seems to happen. What's interesting here is the way that these moments of quietude, inane dialogue, jokes, games, reflections, familiar to those who know Sonatin well, from those Yakuza in that film and the way that they kill time at the beach. The way that this throws into relief the violence, I think the violence, as I've said, is extreme here. But as in Hanabi, I think Kitano is actually asking us to question the violence, the efficacy of violence, the effects of violence, not just on the body, but on the psychology, on the interior makeup of those involved in it. There are all kinds of random explosions of violence here, and they don't really amount to much or ultimately achieve much. One of the prevalent views of this film has been that it reflects on Pearl Harbor, on Japanese entry into World War II. And there are several aspects of the film that substantiate this sort of allegorical reading. Not in the least the name of Beat Takeshi's character, Yamamoto, who was the one of the architects, if not the architect, of Pearl Harbor. This one could relate not just to a specific historical period, such as the Pacific conflict, but also to perceptions about the Japanese character and the way that these perceptions have been culturally disseminated through stereotypes of, for instance, the samurai or the Yakuza, and self-inflicted violence such as harakiri, the ritual disembowelment of the samurai, or the almost cliched action of the cutting off of a finger to atone for perceived transgression in Yakuza law and in Yakuza culture. So I think ultimately Kitano is intending to reflect on violence here and its place within the Japanese psyche, if you like, or certainly on perceptions of Japanese historical and cultural stereotypes or archetypes. And I think this is what makes this a key, as I said, useful, if not great, Kitano film. It certainly, because of this, takes its place alongside films like Hanabi and Sonatin in kind of dismantling some of the tropes of the Yakuza film and exploring a very insular world through destabilizing some of the key things that we purport to know about that world, particularly through exploring notions of ennui. The development of the central relationship between the African-American and Kitano's Yakuza figure follows fairly predictable lines and ends with what some have perceived as a kind of problematic scene that extols notions of brotherhood and love. But the fact that this is done in the context of a film, again, in which notions of loyalty within the gang, within the Yakuza gang, take precedence, the fact of brotherly love here actually seems to be going beyond that and to be stressing a different kind of connection, a much more emotional, much more open connection between two men with regard to how they have been situated in the homosocial relationships that have defined their lives. So with this in mind, give Brother a look. See for yourself, if you don't know the film, what you make of it. And certainly if this is your first entry into Kitano's filmography, then certainly seek out films like Hanabi, Sonatine, Boiling Point, or the more recent Outrage and Outrage Beyond to get a firm sense of how Brother fits within Kitano's overall sort of stylistic and thematic treatment of violence. Happy viewing. As always, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about Kitano in general. Comment below, like and subscribe, or don't, and I'll see you on the next video.